Hello, and welcome to the very first of our long format series, as well as essentially what will be our first podcast. So I've decided that I need to start with something in the pre-content space. It's been dancing around for at least a couple years, and I want to say it directly. Straight A's are not enough anymore. And that's not because GPA stopped mattering. It still matters. You still need to be academically competitive, of course, but something happened to what a strong GPA actually signals to a committee. And if you don't understand it, you're going to build your entire application around a metric that's lost some of its currency. Here's some of the data. The University of Washington researchers found that post-pandemic grade inflation has been persistent, especially in math and science. More A's, more consistently. And here's the part that matters. The correlation between grades and what a student actually knows weakened. Committees know this. Why do they know this? They have the students in their class that have these smaller skill sets. They've watched it happen in real time. They've watched applicant pools fill up with more A's than any previous cycle. And they've had students arrive with perfect academic records and genuine preparation gaps. So they started looking harder at everything that isn't a GPA number, because that number doesn't hold as much meaning. And here's what it means to you. And I want you to really hear this. The applicant who struggled, failed, and got back up and built something real, that applicant reads much more compellingly right now than ever before. Not despite the struggle, but because of it. Because the struggle produces evidence that a 4.0 GPA cannot. Evidence on how you navigate genuine difficulty without a template. Evidence of professional resilience, which, by the way, is what practicing OT actually requires every single day. Now, if your record is perfect, this is not a reason to panic. It's a specific kind of warning. A 4.0 without evidence of genuine challenge and professional growth is less distinguishing than it used to be. The committees have seen more 4.0s than ever. What makes you memorable is what you build alongside that 4.0. 3 sentences that matter more than lots of semesters of A's. What happened? What did you do about it? And one of the most important things, what you understand about yourself professionally because of it. That combination tells me something in a GPA that a GPA cannot. And right now, it's scoring that way. So I want to tell you something that's going to change how you think and what you're training to become. Not just the job, the profession. New OTs entering practice from now on are entering a profession in genuine transformation. The traditional clinical model, fee-for-service, insurance-driven, clinical base, is not the ceiling anymore. And for many new graduates, it may not be your primary path, which is awesome. Let me tell you what OTD capstone projects look like right now, because this is the clearest window I know, in my personal opinion, what direction the profession is going. You can look at capstones all over the internet. There are lots of them posted. Schools often use a way that they can present that information so that the future students or interested people can look at them. So in examples I want to share, can share with you the future of the profession. One student built a capstone around keeping aging communities active in pickleball. Not a clinic, not a billing code, an occupation-based injury prevention program for a population health challenge. That is OT's wheelhouse. Another example is a student that built a model for long COVID rehab when no protocol existed. Another capstone student built community health intervention for graduate students through occupation, not clinical treatment. So, and by the way, if you want the references to those items, you can check them out in the printed area or the area in this that's documented. And those resources are available. But those students are not waiting for someone to create an OT job for them. They are creating their own jobs. They're creating new practice models. Some of them will build careers around work that does not have OT in the job title. That is what committees nowadays are looking for evidence in your application. Not, do you understand what OTs do? But that you understand what occupation does for human health and human life. That you can imagine a version of your career that maybe doesn't even have a name yet. The billing structure reality is important here. Fee-for-service is under a lot of pressure. The OT who can only practice within existing billing structures is vulnerable to every structural change in healthcare financing. The OT who understands what occupation does for human health can make that case to engineers, community organizations, employers, policymakers, is not in danger. In your personal statement, the committee is asking whether you understand what you're training to become. A lot of times that sounds like, what does it mean to you to be an OT? Or how did you end up with OT as something you're interested in? Something along that lines. The applicant who describes their observations as part of their personal statement in terms of what occupation did for a specific person's life without using names and all of that, that connects that vision of what a profession can do way beyond the clinical setting. And that statement makes people listen and lean forward. Go to potential OT capstone catalogs. Browse what OTD students are actually building. Read capstones in areas that you're interested in. That catalog is the very future of OT practice in real time. And it's free. And it should ignite for you your excitement for OT practice, because we are not just fee for service. Okay, now stay with me, because what happened to the personal statement in the last couple of years and most recently is something that every applicant needs to understand before they submit a single word. AI generated personal statements are detectable. Not always by software, but by humans who actually read hundreds of personal statements every single cycle and know what a genuine professional voice sounds like versus what a language model produces. The pattern is recognizable, comprehensive, polished, and very well organized. And guess what? Completely devoid of any specific human detail that makes a personal statement actually move someone, make them interested in you. So, programs responded. And the response is not primarily about a policy on AI, but it's a tool. And you've probably heard it. Blue notebooks or blank screen typing are back. If you don't know what a blue notebook is, that's okay. In the 2000s, that's about when I was getting my degree, the final step in my OT program admissions interview was a writing sample in a blue book, handwritten, timed, no assistant. And I remember myself remembering and reviewing that I had to follow the format: introduction, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, conclusion. And I remember, don't forget to do that format. The prompt that I had, if I even referred to it, it would age me. But the prompt is often a hot topic in healthcare or some sort of interesting prompt, something you know about. You wrote by hand under that time pressure and you turned them in. So with the emergence of AI, blue books are coming back. I've even seen recently where articles are saying some programs are removing access to any technologies related to lectures at all. And that's in law school because they were finding the law students aren't paying attention to the lecture themselves and not writing their own notes. They're just producing things on online formats and the information is not syncing. So blue books are back. Or the other alternative is sometimes a Google format where the students are just go into the classroom, there's a blank screen and you're just typing. That is also around. Because AI made what they always assessed very urgent. So can you actually think? And can you put that thinking on paper without help, like right away during an interview? The on-site writing sample does two things simultaneously. It checks whether your polished personal statement reflects your actual writing ability. And it evaluates clinical competency because documentation is something you will do every single day of your career. The ability to write clearly and professionally under time pressure is not a nice to have, it's a requirement. So, what does a genuine voice look like versus performed voice? Let me give you an actual comparison. In a performed voice, committees see this so many times in the cycle. Ready? I have always been passionate about helping people achieve their fullest potential. After observing an occupational therapist in action, I was inspired by the holistic, client-centered approach that distinguished OT from every other OT profession. Great. That sounds like you've been practicing it, and it sounds pretty fake. So, try this one as a genuine voice. This will make someone stop and pay attention. So I watched an OT spend about 20 minutes talking to a classroom teacher while her patient, a 7-year-old with sensory processing differences, was playing nearby. She was treating the child in that moment, but I didn't know that, so I talked to the OT about that. And what I found out is that she was talking to the teacher about how to adapt the environment in the other hours when the OT wasn't there. So she was changing what was happening for that student the other hours in the classroom that happened outside of the therapy room. That's the work that I want to do. The second example is specific. It's real moment. It connects something you saw in a clinical observation to professional insight. That combination is undetectable by AI because it's generated by your lived experience. And just as an aside, you're going to see that as you go into graduate programs, and even if you're an undergrad, that is going to be the shift in education, where you're going to have to apply what you're learning to your personal lived experience that AI cannot do. Your editing by AI has been around a long time, but using it to create your personal thought should not be done. Your specific life is your competitive advantage. You need to be using that. And practice it 3 times a week, 20 minutes. Set a timer, write. No editing, no revising. When the timer goes off, read what you wrote. This should be your genuine voice. Your personal statement should sound like that. Okay, we're not done. The infrastructure of OT admissions changed in a way that most applicants have completely missed, and it's affecting how every field in your application might get scored. So, holistic review has always existed in OT admissions. What changed is some of the infrastructure. OTCAS, the system that you apply to, allows programs to integrate rubrics into their application review process that's been there. Scores can be assigned to observation quality, personal statement, professional experience depth, non-academic factors, just as much as the GPA and/or GRE is weighted. This is a structural change, and it matters for you and how you think about every piece of your application. With rubric integration, a committee member now could be assigning a score, defining the depth that the rubric that weighs your clinical reasoning, professional reflection quality, and with that level of specificity. A student with a 3.3 GPA and exceptional observation descriptions can score competitively against a student with a 3.7 and generic materials. That philosophy of holistic review has not changed. The infrastructure that makes it systematic is new for some programs. And the implication is significant. Every non-GPA field in your application now carries a real scored weight. Let me be specific about what each field needs to do for you. So, observation hours. When you do your observation hours, you should also include a description. If it's available, some schools have forms, so you can't go off the form. But an observation should not just be a log of hours, not a summary of what the OT did. For your own good, do a reflection, even if you can't add this to your application. But put in this description a demonstration of clinical reasoning, a professional reflection. Tell me about the genuine engagement with the occupation-based philosophy underlying what you observed. So if the rubric scoring you can score you deeper for having more interesting experiences, not just did you have experiences. So the next one's personal statement. This is not a summary of your resume. Please stop writing it that way. Also, please stop writing that you just want to help people. Don't do that either. Instead, provide a specific, honest, professionally grounded account of who you are, what you observed, what you understood because of it, and why in this profession. Why this profession? Why do you want to be an OT? Generic enthusiasm scores low. Specific professional reasoning scores high. The additional form information prompt, not something you want to leave blank ever. I will tell you right now, me personally, when I would read applications, I love to read that blank. Why? Because it gives you an opportunity to address a concern directly and demonstrate personal awareness, or capture the content of why something the fields don't capture. Committees actively read these responses. They can change minds. A well-crafted accountability narrative have turned a lot of borderline files into admits. I've watched it happen. Matter of fact, I've helped it happen because I've said, hey, I know the student X has this, but did you read this story? Did you read why there's this gap, or why they have this particular GPA? Put information there if it's applicable to you, because it does matter and it's the place to put it. So we've reached our last chapter. And this is one of the most misread signals in all the pre-OT content right now. GRE optional does not mean what applicants thinks it means. So GRE does not mean it's easier to get in. It means the bar changed there. And in some cases, it got really harder. Here's what actually happened. Two things drove the shift. The pandemic actually removed physical access from testing centers. Programs that maintain a hard GRE requirement were effectively excluding an entire applicant cohort because they could not take the GRE. For programs that depend on enrollment revenue, that was not sustainable. GRE option became the accommodation, and for some schools it stayed. The research provided an academic foundation. So, in 2023, a meta-analysis in the Journal of Higher Education examined 201 studies. 62.3 of the effects showed no predictive value of GRE scores on graduate student outcomes. The pandemic created the opening, and the research made it defensible. Together, both of those created the shift that's really not reversing. But programs did not stop caring about the academic reasoning capacity. Instead, they started looking for evidence of that clinical reasoning, academic reasoning, in places that require more directly connected to what OT requires. So, on-site writing samples, OTCAS rubric scoring, interview scenarios, mission and vision alignment. And the last one is the most consequential and the least discussed. So, some programs have removed every traditional requirement, GRE, observation hours, prescribed prerequisites, and replaced them with vision-driven selection criteria. This is not lowering the bar. It is a different bar, and in some cases, it's a much higher bar. A program built around occupation-based curriculum theory is not looking for applicants who can describe what OTs do. They are looking for applicants who genuinely understand what occupation means as a foundation for human health, who have engaged with the philosophical underpinnings of the profession at each that most pre-OT students never reach. When you see GRE optional, your first question should not be, is this easier to get into? Your first should be, what is this program's vision, and do I understand it deeply enough to demonstrate an alignment fit? Research the program's faculty. Read their published works. Understand the theoretical framework. Then build your application around demonstrating what you already think in those terms. The applicant who does that work is the one that the program will admit. So, the applicant that gets in this cycle understands something most content isn't out there saying. They understand that occupational therapy is not just a clinical job. It is a profession built on a philosophical framework about what occupation, the things that matter to humans, does for human health and human life. That framework is expanding beyond the clinic into communities, systems, and spaces that do not even have OT in the job title. They are honest about their path, including the hard parts, because the hard parts are where the professional growth lives. They write in their own voice, specifically with real moments and real insights that only their specific life could have created. They research programs deeply enough to demonstrate the genuine understanding of program alignment, not just I know who this program is. They treat every field of their application as an opportunity to demonstrate their personal qualities, not just the GPA, everything. Now, if you want to build up that application, come join us in the OT community on School, SKOOL, community, OT Student Leveled Up. That is where I provide all kinds of resources to my pre-OT community. The link is in the description. Also, there are some times that I offer personal with groups to go over specific application content. Sometimes those sessions are on my webpage. They fill up pretty quickly, but go ahead and see if you want to hang out with me and join us for group, we can do that. If you are an OT student and you're just listening to this because you just like OT student content, that's cool. I have a group for you, SKOOL community, called OT Student Secret Codes. That content is just for OT students. You can graduate to that one when you get into OT school, or come on over if you're in OT school. In that area, I talk about all kinds of concepts to help break down complicated things for the OT student. I talk about how to create relationships with professors, references, field work, capstone, all the things. So I'd love to see you there. And I'm happy you joined us today on our very first long format on what changed in OT admissions. And I look forward to hanging out with you again later. Thanks, guys. Good luck on your applications.